Hello everybody and welcome to our second video on the UN. Today we will be looking at whether it has been a success or failure so far. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes. So by the end of this presentation, you guys should know what the Blue Berets were. You guys should know 5 examples of UN peacekeeping operations. And finally, you guys should know 2 examples of genocidal actions that the UN failed to stop. So in this video, we will be judging how well the UN has worked by examining some of its interventions in its attempt to maintain world peace. Now, the UN doesn't have an army, but it gets its soldiers from member states' armies. And these soldiers have the nickname the Blue Berets or the Blue Helmets due to their light blue helmets. They are deployed only in peacekeeping operations that have been authorized by the UN Security Council. Now, one of the first places they were deployed was in Palestine in 1947. So the UK requested the UN's assistance in Palestine as tensions rose between Jews and Arabs in the country. Now, Palestine had been under UK mandated rule since 1920 when the Ottoman Empire had disintegrated after World War I. So the UK left Palestine with tensions at its highest with the influx of Jewish immigrants in the Holocaust looking for a nation to call their own. The UN drew up a plan that partitioned the country Palestine into a Jewish and an Arab state, despite Palestine and other neighbouring Arab states protesting against this plan. In 1948, the Jews set up the State of Israel, causing a war. The UN eventually arranged a truce in the war, which included Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and the Lebanon. However, there were massive problems after this truce, with another war breaking out in 1967, known as the Six-Day War, and Palestinians have been mistreated and denied many human rights by Israel, which is backed by the United States. Another early mission for the UN was in India in the Kashmir region in 1949. As we saw in our study of decolonization, Britain's partition plan led to massive amounts of deaths between Muslim Pakistanis and Hindu Indians, with the Kashmir staying in India with this partition plan, even though it was primarily Muslim in population. Um, Inevitably enough, war broke out in the region. The UN did help to negotiate a ceasefire and establish a temporary line in the region that is still in effect to this day. You can see the line here with the white dots, and tensions still do continue in this region. Um, both of these missions were purely peacekeeping missions who weren't armed. Now, the first use of an armed UN troops took place in the Korean War in 1950. If you guys remember when we looked at the Korean War, the UN sent forces when North Korea had invaded South Korea. The vast majority of the troops in this UN army came from South Korea and America. It can get a bit confusing, but there's also armed peacekeeping missions. So while the one in Palestine and the one in the Kashmir, they were unarmed, the first actual armed peacekeeping mission took place in Egypt when Britain, France, and Israel seized control of the Suez Canal from Egypt. And the difference here between that and Korea is Korea wasn't a peacekeeping mission, it was actually a declaration of war. So the largest and one of the most controversial peacekeeping missions that took place regarding the UN was in the Congo between 1960 and 1964. And as again we saw in our study of decolonization and the Congo, war broke out when Patrice Lumumba took power after Belgium had been removed in 1960. And the state of Katanga, influenced by Belgian business interests, declared its independence from Lumumba's Congo. Lumumba asked for help from the UN. 10,000 troops were sent, with Lumumba believing that they were there to help him retake Katanga, but they were there primarily as peacekeeping forces. When they refused to help him retake the region, he turned to the USSR for help after being denied help by the USA. However, Lumumba was overthrown and murdered after his attacks on Katanga failed, and there is strong evidence to show that the US and Belgium were involved in Lumumba's death. Now, the UN did help to form a new government in Congo without Katanga after the death of Lumumba. However, after multiple attacks on the peacekeeping forces by the Katanganese, including one on Irish troops known as the Siege of Jadotville, which has been recently made into a movie, the UN finally decided to send in an army into Katanga, finally bringing it back under Congo's control in 1963. Now, many people criticized this because this was a peacekeeping mission, and for a peacekeeping mission to go in and actually actively kill people as they did in Katanga crossed the line that many were very uncomfortable with. The conflict in the Congo also saw the UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld actually try to fly into the country during the conflict, but he died in a plane crash. UN troops were used again, just like they were in Korea in the Gulf War of 1991, to attack Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, and his illegal invasion of Kuwait, as I said, in 1991. So, while a report has shown that 2 out of 3 UN peacekeeping missions were successful, there have been many occasions where they have been unable to prevent really horrible atrocities from taking place. In Rwanda in 1994, the genocide of the Tutsi people of Rwanda by the majority population of the Hutu left 1 million people dead between the months of April and July of that year. And the UN was very slow to react to stop this atrocity. In Srebrenica, in modern day Bosnia and Herzegovina, which would have been Yugoslavia formerly, Bosnian Serbs attacked the town of Srebrenica and killed 8,000 Muslim men and boys. The UN was supposed to be protecting these people who had come into the compound and had surrendered their weapons to the UN. The UN refused to give them back their weapons as the town was attacked, and the UN peacekeepers watched as the defenseless Muslims were murdered and massacred. So, with all of this evidence, should we call the UN a success or failure, or is it fair to judge it yet? Certainly, some of its agencies like UNICEF, which provide food, medical care, and clothes for child victims of war, have been very successful. And while it has helped diffuse many conflicts, it is clear that it hasn't lived up to the hopes of its founders, who wanted to establish international peace. I would argue that the flawed existence of the Security Council has seen nations acting in their own interests or in their allies' interests rather than for the greater good and helping to establish this international peace. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So you guys should now know what the Blue Berets were. You guys should know 5 examples of UN peacekeeping operations. And finally, you guys should know 2 examples of genocidal actions that the UN failed to stop. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.